So, we talk a lot about this, but I'm going to talk about it again because I just think yesterday it's so important after what I saw yesterday, all these like 1 million kids all over the country protesting the fact that we have the right to bear arms, like protesting our Constitution. 1 million know-nothing little punks protesting the Constitution. And one of the things I talk about is the fact that we have lost, all of us, even on the right, a lot of us have lost the reasons why we believe what we believe. And so when you lose the reason for something, everything becomes narrative. Nothing becomes argument. Nothing becomes logic. Nothing becomes actual debate. It just becomes narrative. And so children, right, make for good narrative. So when these kids come out and they start talking and they're just all of them, like all teenagers are Nazis. And we'll get back to that in a minute. All teenagers know what they know, but because they know what they know because they don't know what they don't know, okay? Let us just go all the way back. And this is why we have Aristotle with us today, right? Aristotle said the purpose of life, says Aristotle, is eudaimonia, which is what Jesus, here's Jesus, Jesus, because this is why we have these shelves. This is what Jesus called life in abundance. He said, I'm here to give you life in abundance. It's what we on the Andrew Klavan show call joy, right? Joy is the purpose of life. The joy is to live life with a great energy. It's not to be happy because sometimes life is sad. It is to be joyful, involved in life, to be your full self, to be the self that God made. That is when yesterday we had on the mailbag, we were talking about shame. Somebody talked about fat pride. And I said, all pride marches are really shame marches because people feel ashamed of something, whether they should or not. They feel ashamed of something and they're blaming other people. They think if they can just get other people to stop saying bad things about them, they'll then be happy. But that's not true. You feel joy when you orientate yourself toward the good. And, here are things that both Jesus and Aristotle said. Like Jesus said, it's what comes out of a man's heart that defiles a man. It's what's in a man's heart that defiles a man. He said a lot of people don't understand this part when he said, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And what he's saying is you're not just what you do, you are why you do it. And Aristotle pointed this out too. He said the good man is not the man who does a certain thing. It's the man who is trained. He's trained his passions to follow the good. And we were talking about this, I don't know, a week ago, about a guy one guy doesn't cheat on his wife because he loves his wife and he believes that fidelity is a good. And so he trains himself to be faithful for that reason, to want to be faithful for those good reasons, for those internal reasons. And another guy is faithful to his wife because his wife's father is a mobster and says, if you ever cheat on my wife, my daughter, I'll kill you. Those are two different people. One is a faithful husband and one is just a coward. And so it's really why you do, how you do what the good things that you do and how you learn to be free and how you learn to be good. You have to be free to do that. You have to be able to choose to do the good. All joy comes from doing the good through passion. And you have to be free to do that. You have to be free to do that. So this stuff came from Aristotle through Jesus. These two strains of thought, the classic Greek thought and the Jewish thought, came together and informed. It wasn't like everybody who ever had a thought in Western civilization was thinking about this, but this all informed all of Western civilization. And they understood over time that people had to be free. Now, when we lost the reason for doing good, when we forgot what it is, then you only have things that feel good. You say, and I don't mean just like pleasure. You say, well, this makes me feel righteous. We talk about virtue signaling, right? This makes me feel virtuous. And Nietzsche pointed out that kind of good is really just a will to power. That kind of good is really just saying, I like this, I think this is good, and I want you to think it's good too, because I have no argument. I only have power. So I want the will to power. So this has been true. This was true before Nietzsche discovered it. Remember, Pontius Pilate said to Jesus, what is truth? And people constantly, this is what Plato and Aristotle were arguing against, was all the philosophers around them were saying, well, good is relative, just like they say now, good is relative. There is no absolute good. And Plato and Socrates and Aristotle were saying, not so much. And Jesus was saying, no, there is a thing called truth. I'm the truth. And if you follow me, I will lead you to that truth. So when you lose that, all you've got is the will to power and narrative, because narrative gins up the emotions and it places you in a story that makes it seem like whatever the person is selling you is good. And that's why they bring out these children. It's also, by the way, why you have guns. You have guns because people who don't know the good want to have power over you. They want to impose their good on you, which strips you of joy. It strips you of the right to choose to do good, right? It really does all fit together. You know, this is why people get upset when they read Plato's Republic, because he wanted to expel the poets because he didn't think they would teach people good. But you do have to have a civilization that teaches you the good. That is one of the things we had back in the 1950s when they would teach you why you were free. They, you know, when I went to school, they would teach you why people had to be free and what it meant and why it mattered. And now they don't teach you that anymore. They just have emotional arguments for why guns are scary. Take away the guns. And that's why they bring out these kids, right? That is why they bring out the kids, because they think the kids are an emotional prop. They're an emotional narrative. They're an emotional story. Now, let me show you, I just show you for a minute how the networks. First of all, let me just show you one of the kids. Just pick a kid that we have in the, it's Matt Post, number one. It's the top one.
I believe that as students, we need to make a few things clear. To start, we will not sit in classrooms with armed teachers. We refuse to learn in fear. We reject turning our schools into prisons. We will accept nothing less than comprehensive gun control. And if it's what it takes, we will shame our national policymakers into protecting us. Not just in schools, but in churches, movie theaters, on the streets, and in the communities of color, which are disproportionately devastated by the sickness of gun violence. The lawmakers who fail to support us, those who look for every answer to our nation's gun problem, but the guns themselves, will be complicit in every death that comes after.
So all of that, all emotionalism, it's all emotionalism. You know that there are many more, like 2 or 3 times more violent crimes in England, where there is a lot of gun control, more violent crime in England than there is in the United States. And people don't like to talk about that. They also don't like to talk about the fact that, you know, polls are very confusing about what young people think about guns. Really, a lot of young people are not for gun control. This is 1 million kids, which is an extraordinary demonstration, but there's like 56 million kids in the country, and some of these kids were in kindergarten, so they didn't know what the hell they're talking about. They just want to get out of school. You know, there's a Second Amendment Foundation which saw a 1,200% surge in youth membership, so that's not being covered. It's all this kid and emotion, this bullying, and because this is important with emotionalism, it's important if you're doing a narrative not to let the opposite team get their narrative out. That's why another reason you have to have censorship. You don't need censorship if you have arguments, right? We don't need censorship on this show. We don't need censorship at the Daily Wire. No right-winger of substance is trying to censor anybody in America today. Only left-wingers are trying to do it. Why? Because they have no argument. They have no argument. And if you watch, here's a New Prague High School, I guess, in Minnesota. One kid walks out with a sign that says, "Guns don't kill people, people kill people." The principal of New Prague High School in Minnesota comes out and chases him away. His narrative is not allowed. Look at this.
We don't.
Yeah, we do.
The Supreme Court. 505 says you cannot. Why? Put anything on unless you get 24 hours.
I'm going to go stand outside then.
And I will ask Officer
And he's pointing his finger at him. And let me just play one more thing, and then we'll talk about something else. But let me just play this. This is an older video. This was not yesterday, of Allison Camerata, this is cut number 11, talking to these kids, and listen to her feeding them the narrative, right? First they get the emotionalism from them, which is just pure bilge. It's just utter bilge. And then Allison Camerata feeds them the narrative that they're supposed to deliver.
So what do you say to the NRA?
Dismantle.
And don't make another organization.
Yeah, don't make another organization under a different name. Don't you dare come back here. The fact that you were in power for so long and that you had so much influence for so long in America just goes to show how much time and effort we still need to spend on fixing our country.
Absolutely.
And gun control is just the first thing right now the first thing that we are mainly focusing on.
Look, I don't have to tell you guys, they give millions of dollars to politicians. They have a very powerful tool. So, I mean, how do you expect politicians who need money to keep running for office to say no to the NRA?
Because we keep telling them that if they accept this blood money, they're against the children. They're against the people who are dying. And there's no other way to put it at this point. You're either funding the killers or you are standing with the children.
There's no other way to put it. There's no other way to put it. But listen to what Alison Camerata did. She's talked about the money that the NRA gives to support their point of view, as if nobody else were giving money to politicians to support their point of view. Money is speech in America. Money is the way you get your speech heard. That the NRA has a point, that the NRA is trying to support. No, they just want to they want to kill the children. That is why Dana Lash goes to work every day and she says, you know what I want? I want dead kids. That's what she's saying. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. This is the other thing. The entire thing doesn't make any sense because they're talking about essentially when you give up your guns, you are trusting to the government. It's the government that failed in Florida, right? They went 39 times to this guy's house, this shooter's house, didn't do a damn thing about it while the shooting was going on. The cops waited outside. It's the government that failed. They hate the government. Donald Trump is the most powerful man in the government. He's the guy in the government. But let's trust him with our rights. We trust Donald Trump, but we hate Donald Trump, but take our guns because something. It doesn't even make any sense. It's gibberish. It is all emotionalism because they have lost the plot of America. They've lost the plot of the West. So all of this, it requires silence, and that's what we're seeing. My pal Steve Crowder was banned from Twitter and YouTube. I think he's still suspended, they call it, for some, Crowder's a comedian, and he says all this outrageous things. And this is another thing you'll notice, by the way. The left's comedians are not funny anymore. Jimmy Kimmel goes on and cries, and Stephen Colbert is just bitter. And they use Donald Trump the way second-rate comedians use the F word. They use Donald Trump because their audience will always laugh if they say Trump is stupid, if they say Trump is corrupt, if they say he's in league with Russia. It's the same as using the F word. People will laugh when you curse on stage. And then you watch a guy like Jerry Seinfeld who never curses because he's funny. He's just really funny. Even Louis C.K., who before he was shamed and cast out into the exterior darkness, was really funny. He used to do two kinds of material. Blue material, which was okay, and then his other stuff, his observational stuff, which was hilarious, And that's the way they use Donald Trump. They're not funny anymore. Crowder is still funny, and he was banned. Christina Hoff Sommers, who's been on the show a couple times, we should have her back soon. She went to give a speech at Lewis and Clark Law School, I think it was, and they were shouting her down. She writes about it in the Wall Street Journal today. They shouted her down. They played music, and they did try. The administration tried to let her speak, but she couldn't, and she was really cut short because the adults have lost their way. It's all emotionalism. It's all narrative, so they have to keep the other narrative silent.